The Gospel according to John, chapter 11, verse 45. You ever say amen? John 11:45. Therefore, many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin and said, "What are we going to do since this man does many signs? If we let him continue in this way, everybody will believe in him. Then the Romans will come and remove both our place and our nation." One of them, Caiaphas, who was high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing at all. You are not considering that it is to your advantage that one man should die for the people rather than the whole nation perish." He did not say this on his own, but being high priest that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation. And not for the nation only, but also to unite the scattered children of God. So, from that day on, they plotted to kill him. This morning, we're going to begin a sermon series called The Road to the Cross. This morning's sermon is the first in that series, The Day They Decided He Must Die. The day they decided that he must die. This portion of scripture is familiar to most of us. Preceding the scripture that I just read is the account of the resurrection of Mary and Martha's brother Lazarus. Lazarus and Jesus had somewhat of a unique relationship. Among those who Jesus truly counted as friends was Lazarus, Mary, and Martha outside of the inner circle of the 12. But Lazarus and Jesus had an even closer relationship. If you remember the story, you know that at this point that Mary and Martha had already sent word to Jesus to come to Bethany because Lazarus was sick. But if you remember, Jesus tarried for a while. He waited before he arrived there in Bethany, to the point that when he arrived there, Lazarus was already sleeping. You remember the account, the shortest verse in the Bible, Jesus wept. Jesus wept when he saw the compassion that the sisters had over the death of their brother. And he asked the question, "Where have you laid him?" They took them to the tomb where Lazarus lay, and Jesus gave that command to roll the stone away. And it was Martha who said, "It's been 4 days. By now he stinks." They rolled the stone away, and Jesus gave the command, "Lazarus, come forth." Lazarus, brown in his grave clothes, got up, walked out of the grave, and Jesus said, loose him and let him go. If you remember at that time, there were people there in Bethany around that situation, around Mary and Martha during this mourning process, and they saw what had happened. And that's where we pick up the story this morning. But there is a gospel message in Lazarus' situation himself. Because Lazarus came out of the tomb so that Jesus could go in. When Jesus stood outside Lazarus' tomb and he said, Lazarus, come forth, and the man who had been dead walked out of the grave, it began a process. But that miracle created a chain reaction, because the miracle that brought Lazarus out of the tomb is the same miracle that pushed the leaders to send Jesus toward his tomb. In other words, Lazarus lived so Jesus would die. When Lazarus came out of the grave, two things happened at the same time. Some people believed. Others went to the Pharisees. And when the Pharisees heard about it, they called the council. The council meeting produced the decision. From that day on, they plotted to kill him. So in a real sense, Lazarus walking out of the grave set Jesus on the road to the cross. It's a gospel reversal of sorts. Lazarus walked out of the tomb, but a few weeks later, Jesus would be placed in the tomb. Lazarus was raised by the voice of Jesus. Jesus would rise by the power of God. Lazarus would live again, but eventually die again. Jesus would rise to never die again. Lazarus walked out of the grave, but Jesus walked towards the grave, because the miracle that saved Lazarus was the miracle that sealed Jesus' death sentence. The same miracle that gave Lazarus life gave the Sanhedrin council a reason to kill Jesus. And here is the gospel truth. Lazarus walked out of the tomb because Jesus was willing to go into one. Theologically, truth preaches. Jesus did not raise Lazarus just to help a friend. He raised Lazarus to show something. He had already declared in John 11:25, I am the resurrection and I am the life. But soon now he would prove it, not by raising someone else, but by raising himself. Let's break this down step by step. 11:45 says, therefore many of the Jews who came to Mary and saw what he did believed in him. The witness. Many saw. Many saw what he did. Many saw the miracles. And I want to build the bridge from this situation this morning to not only inform us of the resurrection story, but to tie us into the resurrection story, because we are all walking through life as a witness to who God is and the power that exists in him. So just like many saw what Jesus did when he raised Lazarus, I want to insert you into the story right now, and I want to say that many will see what we do also. Many will see the gifts that God placed into our lives, and many will see the work of God through us. People can see it. The evidence of God working in your life is often visible to the people who are around you. When Jesus raised Lazarus, it wasn't done in secret. People saw the miracle. And when people saw it, many believed. Because when God moves, belief is always one of the possible responses. When God moves, the miracle isn't the only thing that is revealed. Hearts are revealed too. And even today, there are two kinds of people who witness the work of the Lord. Some see what God is doing and it builds their faith. Others see what God is doing and it builds their criticism. Some celebrate the work of God. Others try to explain it away, control it, or even stop it. So don't be confused, my brothers and my sisters, because there is a parallel between what we are going to see Jesus experience and what we ourselves experience. Because when people see what God is doing through you, two responses will come. They will either see the miracle in your life and believe, or they will see it and criticize it. They will either see it and celebrate it, or they will see it and try to stop it. Don't be surprised when enemies come against you, when people put stumbling blocks in your way, because people will see what God is doing through you, and they're either going to respond by celebrating that, or they're going to respond by trying to stop that. Which brings me to my second point. There was a whispering among the crowd. When Lazarus came out of that tomb, there was a whispering, and some told. 11:46, but some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. There will always be people who see the same thing but respond differently. Some saw the miracle and believed, others saw the miracle and they ran to report it. Some people will doubt what they see, and sometimes they don't doubt it at all. Sometimes they just hate the gift of God that they see operating. Some in that crowd, that they hated the gift of God that was operating within that situation. They hated the gift of God that was operating in Jesus. And some see the gift of God that is operating in you and they hate it. Because the same evidence that leads one person to worship can lead another person to resentment. Let me say that again. The same evidence that leads one person to worship can lead another person to resentment. In 11:47, it says, so the chief priests and the Pharisees, they convened the Sanhedrin. Jesus was not in that room, but his name was. Sometimes your name comes up in places you don't even reside in. Places that you're not even standing in. Places that you're not even thinking about. Your name is there. Rooms you never walked into. Conversations that you never joined. Meetings that you weren't included in on. But enemies are discussing you behind closed doors. Because something about what God is doing through you disturbs them. Sometimes your name shows up in rooms you've never entered. People are having conversations about you and you weren't invited. But the reason they are talking about you is because God is doing something through you that they can't control. Sometimes your name comes up in places you don't reside. Conversations happen behind closed doors. Plans are being discussed. Opinions are being formed. But here is the good news. When people are talking about you in rooms that you can't enter, God is already in the room. Did you get that? You may not be there, but God has already showed up. You may not be at the seat around the table, but God is already in the presence. The Holy Spirit is already hovering among those people who are having conversations about what they need to do about you. They didn't inform you about anything. But when we are not part of it, God is already present in it. The whole thing was worry. It's the third point. People were worried. There was a fear of losing control. John 11:48 says, if we let him continue in this way, everyone will believe in him. Then the Romans will come and remove both our place and our nation. So here's the amazing thing. The Sanhedrin did not deny the miracles. They did not deny that Jesus had made blind people see. They did not deny that Jesus had made lame folks walk. They did not deny that he had healed a woman who was suffering from an illness of an issue of blood. They did not deny any of this. They did not even try to deny that Jesus had just raised Lazarus. They didn't deny this. They admitted that the signs were real, but the problem was not the miracle. The problem was the outcome. If we let him continue in this way, they were not concerned with the truth. They were concerned with control. They didn't care about the good that had been done. They cared that it didn't fit their narrative. And sometimes people oppose you because what you are doing is not wrong, but because it threatens the outcome they desire. The real problem here was not the miracle. The problem was that Jesus threatened their place. He said that if we let him continue in this way, then the Romans are going to come and they're going to remove us out of our place. And whenever Jesus shows up, he will challenge the place we have given ourselves. They were not afraid that Jesus was lying. They were afraid that Jesus was right. Because if people truly believed in Jesus, their system would collapse. Their control would disappear. Their authority would vanish. And here's the irony. They were afraid the Romans would destroy the temple. But about 40 years later, in AD 70, the Romans did exactly that. The very thing they feared eventually happened. But killing Jesus did not prevent it. Sometimes people reject Jesus because they lack evidence. Not because they lack evidence, but because accepting him would require giving up their place. It's not because they lack evidence of who Jesus is. It's because if they accept him, they have to give up their place, their position, their control, their reputation, their comfort. But here's the thing. Don't worry about every room your name shows up in. If God put his hands on your life, your name will disturb some people. Because when God begins to move through someone, it exposes the hearts of everyone that is around them. And then this brings us to the warrant, that decision. 11:49 and 50, you know nothing at all, Kelvin says. You are not considering that it is to your advantage that one man should die for the people rather than the whole nation perish. Kelvin thought he was speaking politically, but God was speaking prophetically. Kelvin meant kill Jesus and save the nation, but God meant Jesus would die to save the world. The high priest who spent his life offering sacrifices didn't realize he was standing in front of the last sacrifice that God would ever require. Kelvin didn't even realize what he was saying. Yet God was still speaking. Because people blinded by jealousy and hate cannot see when God is working, even when God is working through their own actions. John 11:53. So from that day on, they plotted to kill him. The meeting produced a decision. From that moment forward, the cross was no longer just possible, it became the plan. They were discussing Jesus like he wasn't present, but they didn't realize something. They were planning his death while God was planning salvation. So here's some good news in the midst of the things that we go through in dealing with people who have motives that are not holy and motives that are not righteous. When they gather to plan, they don't realize that God can take their plan and turn it around and use it for our good. Because all things work together for good to those who love God, to those who are called according to his purpose. Sometimes people think they are stopping God's plan when they're actually helping it unfold. Imagine someone standing at the base of a mountain trying to stop a river. They put a rock in the water. They try to block the flow. They think they're controlling the direction of the water, but the river just keeps moving. Sometimes it goes around the rock. Sometimes it goes over the rock. Sometimes it pushes the rock out the way, but the river never stops flowing. That meeting in Jerusalem was a group of men trying to put a rock in the river of God's plan. They thought they were stopping Jesus. They thought they were ending his influence. But what they didn't realize was that the cross wasn't going to end the river. It was the place where the river of salvation began to flow to the whole world. They thought they were stopping him. But what they were actually doing was setting the stage. While they were plotting his death, Jesus withdrew from them. John 11:54 says he no longer walked openly among them. But the next time he would return to Jerusalem, he would be walking towards the cross. It was a death sentence. It was a plan formulated from a place of worry and concern about power and position. It was a plan formulated because not that they didn't believe Jesus, but they hated the work that God was doing through Jesus. It was going to upset their position. It was going to upset the things that motivated them. And it amazes me, my brothers and my sisters, that people who could claim to walk so close to God could be so quick to reject God's plan when it showed up in their face. These people were not ignorant. They knew the story. They knew that it had been foretold the Messiah was going to come. And when Jesus came and he fit the description to the T of what they had been waiting for their entire life, they rejected it rather than accept it, because they had fallen into a place of religious comfort. They had fallen into a place of being comfortable with their titles and with their position and with their power. They were so comfortable that they could not see that God was trying to bless them. There's a lesson in that for us. Wherever you find yourself in life, whatever heights you rise to, never get so comfortable in the situation that you're in that you don't see when God is trying to do something new. Never get so comfortable that you fail to realize when God is getting ready to do exactly what you have been praying for. Because we'll do that. We will pray for something, and we will ask God for something, and we will plead for something. And when God sends it, we reject it because it didn't look like what we thought it was going to look like. And that was the problem. Jesus did not come riding a white horse. He did not come with a robe on of purple. He did not come with a golden crown. He did not look what they thought the Messiah would look like, even though the scriptures had already told them that he would be born meek and humble. They already knew this, but they had set up in their mind what success looked like. And we do the same thing. Success looks like my job title. Success looks like my bank account amount. My success looks like the car that I drive or the house that I live in. But that is not what success looks like. So you ask God to make a way for you. And then when he makes a way, you reject it. Because you've gotten comfortable. You've gotten comfortable and content with the way things are. That's where they had power, they had position. Even though Rome was in their territory, Rome had followed a strategy of coming in and putting them over their own people and giving them the power to rule and have authority over their own people. It was a psychological game. They thought they were in control, but they weren't in control. But at the end of the day, they were afraid they would lose control. Because if the people believe that Jesus is who he says he is, it's going to change everything. It's going to change the way they look at Judaism. It's going to change the way they look at Rome, and then Rome is going to get worried, and Rome is going to come, and Rome is going to take the Sanhedrin out of their place, and they're going to take the high priest out of their place because they got to keep control. All because they were content with the structure rather than looking forward to the things of God. God was trying to give them the greatest gift of all times, but instead, they wanted their authority instead. God was trying to tear the veil of the temple in twain, but instead, they wanted to keep their authority, their power, and their position, rather than accept what God was trying to do for them, which was just to fulfill a promise that he had already made. We are walking, talking, breathing, and praying that God will fulfill his promises. God has made promises to us. He told you that he wasn't going to leave you and that he wasn't going to forsake you. He said, if you're heavy laden and you got problems that you just can't seem to bear, he says, bring them to me. I'll be your burden bearer. He made promises. He told people in the Bible, Jesus told people in the Bible when he healed folks and when he healed their children, he says, your faith has made you whole. That's what he told the woman with the issue of blood who had spent all of her money going to doctor and seeking out a way that could not a way be made out of. But she made up in her mind that she could just touch the hem of his garment, that she would take hold of a promise. We're walking right now. We're living right now because Jesus and God has made promises to us. Be careful that you don't become so content with your place that you miss it when he delivers on the promise. Don't be so comfortable with your place that you miss it when he delivers on the promise. Don't be so content and comfortable with how things are right now that you miss it when he makes a better way. Did you realize that we can get used to being downtrodden? We can get used to things being bad. We can get used to things not working out for us to the point that we stop believing that they are going to work out. Don't be that person, because if you sit here and made up in your mind that it's not going to get better and he tries to make it better, you're not going to believe him when he tries. You're not going to believe him when he brings you out. You're not going to believe him when he delivers you, because it might place you, get this, it might place you in an uncomfortable position. You might have to walk away from some things that make you content. You may have to walk away from some things that make you comfortable to be able to walk into some things that God has prepared for you. Because that's how he works. Is it his godly and divine sense of humor? I don't know. But he has a way of telling you to walk away from that thing that makes you feel warm and cozy and walk into a place of uncertainty, because that's where the blessing is. Over there, the area that you always thought that you would never want to go is the place where God is trying to send you.